What's up, y'all, and welcome to my new series, Wavez Game Reviews. Today we're going to be reviewing Plague Tale Requiem, and a little backstory before we kind of hop into the review. I did play Plague Tale Innocence before this game, and I will be relating a lot of Plague Tale Requiem and the new features and what I think of them to Innocence, but I do not have a review on Innocence because it's a much older game, and I also beat Innocence a long time ago, and I really don't feel like downloading it back on my PC to get some footage. So we're just going to review Requiem, and I'm going to give my thoughts on it and tell you all if it's a good game to play in 2026, but just a little forewarning, there's going to be major spoilers in this video. So if you're really planning to play this game and you don't want any spoilers, maybe skip this video. I did actually beat multiple games over spring break, but out of all the games I did beat over spring break, this was the one I chose to review because the story is so impactful, and just as a story game, gameplay and story-wise, this game does so much better and extends on Innocence so much. It's amazing. First, let's talk about the graphics and the performance. The graphics, even for a 2022 game, is amazing. I know the PC port is obviously, you could squeeze some more performance out of it than the console ports. I personally played on all ultra with ray tracing off, and some of this footage you're going to see, sometimes the ray tracing is going to be on, so you might see a couple stutters here and there, and that's the main reason I turned the ray tracing off. Even with frame gen and upscaling technologies, there's this really weird stutter, and a lot of people report the same problem. So I just played the game on ultra without ray tracing on, and you couldn't even really tell a difference too much, except when you're in like the water areas. But you kind of see me playing around with the camera in some of these clips because there was this weird bug with ray tracing and stuff like that. But other than that, the game looks absolutely stunning with all of the island locations in Lacuna. The game looks amazing. You get to explore so many different locations. You get to explore the town, as you see in this footage, which is more similar to like Innocence type of gloomy, dark environment. It's kind of how the game starts off. I really like that because, you know, you get to see all the shadows refracting and stuff like that. Just all that kind of stuff. Obviously, you see that throughout the whole game. But with frame gen on, even without frame gen on, actually, the game runs very well. This, of course, could be because I have a 50 series card. And even that, I mean, it's running upwards of 120 FPS. I locked it at 120 because that's all I really need. But when I unlocked it, it ran upwards of 170. So this game is incredibly optimized, obviously because it's on its own proprietary engine, not something like Unreal Engine. But I would see this game able to run even good on lower end cards, even cards from 5 or 6 years ago. I would see it would run probably above 60 or 70 FPS depending on what CPU you have as well. It's just a well-optimized game overall, and I think the performance gets a 9 out of 10 for me. The only thing I didn't like was with ray tracing. There was that stutter thing. I wish I had an example to give y'all. I think I was playing around with it a little bit in the footage earlier, but that was really the only complaint I had. Other than that, the performance is phenomenal. With puzzles and just gameplay related stuff, some of the puzzles low-key got me really mad because I was just genuinely so stupid and I couldn't figure it out. But I really like how they include a lot of I really like how they included the new tar feature. The tar is really cool because you could use tar pots and you could just kill armored enemies whenever you want, opposed to the last game when you had to kind of do the whatever the acid one was. You had to burn their helmet off and then you had to throw a rock at their head, which, I mean, this is kind of similar. You have to douse them in tar and then you have to throw fire, so kind of the same process, but I think it's a lot cooler because they get stunned, as they also did in the last one. They get stunned and they can't move in the tar. I mean, kind of just same as the last one, what I'm saying, but it's just a cool new feature because you could also blind them with it. And I just like how they have new innovations in the game, but a lot of the thing that didn't make sense to me is Hugo. This is kind of story related, but it also ties into gameplay a little bit. This might have something to do with the macula and how it formed and kind of went away in his body after Innocence. But in Innocence, we see Hugo, at the end of Innocence especially, he's able to move all of the rats and allow Amicia, especially with the Grand Inquisitor fight at the end, throw the rats at the Inquisitor's rats and, you know, have them stay away from her and not kill her. But in this game, obviously, you're still avoiding the rats, as you see in this footage right here. And it just doesn't make sense to me, because when you're with Hugo, I feel like that would be kind of cool if there was an ability where, like, you can move the rats with that kind of rat summon where, like, you turn into the rats. But when you think about it more in depth, it makes sense, because the Plague Tale games, they're just known for their rat puzzles. And if you didn't have to avoid the rats, there would be no point in them. Story-wise, it doesn't really make sense. I mean, I guess you could think the macula went away from Hugo after Innocence, because as they kind of said at the end of the game, Hugo was with his family, and because he was away from all the violence and anger, that made the macula kind of settle down in his body, therefore making it to where he can't control the rats as easily. But even at the end of Requiem, we see Hugo move the rats away from Amicia and Lucas shortly after the whole island of Lacuna gets like caved in from the giant rat storm he causes after, big spoiler here, the mother's death. But he says after he moves the rats for Amicia and Lucas that it hurts when he does it. So I guess that kind of makes sense. They're just trying to tie into the lore a little bit, but really what I really think is they're trying to make it where they can give the most rat puzzles to the players without making it so easy or something like that, or just, you know, using the rat puzzles, because the game's known for that, as I said. One thing with the crossbow, though, I really do like it, and I really do like how they give Amicia, like, an actual weapon other than just a sling. But ammo is so incredibly scarce to the point where, like, half the time you don't even bother using it. The only real time that you're using it often is when they introduce that rope puzzle, and during those fight sequences where they give you just a ton of crossbow bolts. But I wish they would scatter them more often throughout the game, or at least give it to you more early in the game, because it's a really cool item. And I know it one-shots practically every enemy except for, like, the heavily armored ones. It even one-shots the enemies with just helmets, like the normal enemies with helmets. But they could have made it just maybe less OP. Maybe you had to have more precise shots, or it stunned the enemies when you hit them in the chest rather than just instantly killed them. They could have just bounced it out instead of making the ammo so incredibly scarce, like something like the Requiem in Resident Evil Requiem, where, like, the ammo is so incredibly scarce and it's hard to find, and you have to use your ammo sparingly. It just feels like a wasted feature almost, because the game, I know when it was teased upon launch, I didn't really think of the game that much upon launch, though. The crossbow is teased as a really big new feature, and then here comes the game where you're rarely using the crossbow in common combat scenarios. Rather, you're just using it more towards the end of the game when you have these big combat sequences. Which, it's fun to do that because you feel a lot more badass, because, you know, throughout the whole game you're having to sneak around and you're really weak and you can't really do head-on combat as often. But then towards the end of the game, just gives you tons of crossbow bolts and you're just demolishing everyone. And more about the story, I want to talk about kind of the new characters. And more about the story, I want to talk about what they kind of did with the... And more about the story, I kind of want to give my opinions about Amicia. Amicia, she's a good sister to Hugo. Nonetheless, she's a good sister to Hugo, but what she does to Hugo in the long run is not good, and I feel like a lot of people don't realize this about the game. Amicia obviously gets very angry when people, you know, hurt her friends, especially hurt Hugo, may even take Hugo. And there's that one sequence where she's like, "I'll kill you all," and she kills all those guards and becomes one of the most hated people in the area. Hugo sees that, and that reflects on him. Hugo sees that, he doesn't like it, but it reflects on him. And then when, once again, Hugo's mother comes to die, or Hugo thinks that Amicia dies when she gets shot by the bow, he goes absolutely insane. He goes crazy, and he ends up hurting himself by making the macula take him over more. And it just shows how much of a bad influence Amicia is when it comes to this type of stuff. And the reason Hugo was doing all this stuff, like tearing Lacuna apart, and the reason he created the giant nebula at the end of the game, was because Amicia influenced him to release that anger. And, you know, it could just run in the family. It could run in the Darun family, that type of just absolute anger and need for revenge and vengeance and stuff. But Amicia definitely influenced him that, especially over Innocence, when Amicia got angry and would just go kill everyone. In that sequence where Amicia is stuck in her mind at the end of the game, this is especially prevalent. In the sequence when Amicia is stuck in her mind at the end of the game, it's especially mentioned because Hugo says that he didn't like when Amicia did that. And it shows that Hugo reflected on himself, probably, and realized that violence was not the answer. And that's kind of one of the main themes of this game. Even though Amicia gets super angry and wants that thirst for revenge, violence is never the answer because it always results in something bad. It always results in Hugo overusing his powers and making Immaculate consume him even more, as I said earlier. And it's the same thing with Amicia. It causes her to get in more trouble, causes her to get hurt, and causes people to betray her. One other thing, though, I know the new Plague Tale Legacy game was teased, and I've seen some gameplay on it. It's going to be a more gameplay, combat-focused game. But I really wish they did not use Sophia as the protagonist. I know it's giving her backstory, but look, Sophia, she was a great character. She was a big help to Amicia and her crew, but I don't think she really deserves a whole game for herself. That could definitely be a mixed opinion. Some people might really want a Plague Tale Legacy and a game for Sophia all by herself, because don't get me wrong, I'm not saying she's a bad character. I think something like a DLC would be better for her. But I would much rather a game with the new Amicia, as we saw at the end of Requiem, where maybe she adventures with Sophia through some new type of plague or more adventures that they have together, or it's the adventure of her setting the path for a new Macula character, as she also said she wanted to do. Or, not even that. Imagine we got a Plague Tale game where they skipped like centuries in the future to the third plague, and they had a new carrier. So it would take place in Asia, because that's where I think where the third plague was in real life. And there would be a new carrier and a new protector. And you would follow along with what Amicia set the path as. That would be super cool, because I know at the end of the game there was a new carrier teased. Or maybe they wouldn't even do the third plague. They would do like a whole different made-up plague, like in modern time. I mean, that would definitely be different, because Plague Tale is known for its medieval type of era. But what if they did a plague where it was in modern time and you had to go through enemies with guns or modern weaponry through a new plague? That would be super sick and cool to see, especially with like a carrier again, with all the modern type of stuff we have in society now and what modern video games are, even like a futuristic game. But that's definitely mixed, because, you know, Plague Tale, as I said, is known for its medieval stuff. That would even be cool if we got a DLC for Arno, because Arno, as most people know, he's a former member of the army, whatever they're called, the French army, and he's known as the Wall. Like, he has a cool backstory to him, and he's like a really cool like knight type of fighter. So we could maybe get his backstory on how his son died, because I remember it being mentioned that his son died towards the end of the game and that he didn't want him to mention it. I don't think he should get a whole game for himself. As I said, the same thing with Sophia, because while they are main characters in a sense, they are still technically side characters. I really just think we should get another game for Amicia, or, as I said, a new story about the third plague or something different. I just don't really think they're worthy characters of their own game, but hey, it could be a great game, and I'm definitely going to play it, but I just don't think it's going to have that same charm as, you know, Amicia going along the country with her brother and having that emotional feel to it. The end of Requiem was such an emotional twist, and it was absolutely devastating how it made you kill Hugo at the end. I know you had to do it in order to save the human race or whatever, but it was really hard to do, and it was a super emotional end of the game. The game towards the end was just emotional the whole time, from when the mother died, and from when Hugo would like run up and hug Amicia when they haven't seen each other in a long time. It's a really deep emotional game, because from playing Innocence and playing the whole of Requiem, you form such a bond with these two characters because you're with them for so long. I wouldn't say you get to understand them so incredibly well, but you get to understand them to a point where you could form an emotional bond with them, because they're great characters. Like, they genuinely are. And it really gets you emotional, especially towards the end of the game. It's a great, very well-written game, though. Towards the end, though, I feel like the writing felt a little sped up because the whole game was decently long. I mean, it was around 15 hours, pretty common for a game like this, but towards the end it kind of felt a little rushed. It could have gone on a little longer, or they could have made it towards just less chapters, honestly, because when it felt like the game was ending, you had like 3 more chapters, which was kind of crazy to me. Anyways, that can wrap it up for today's review, y'all. I'm going to confidently rate this game an 8 out of 10. The story was so amazing, and the gameplay definitely complemented it and was such an upgrade from Innocence. It was a great game overall, and it had its repetitive moments, but overall, it was an amazing, graphically stunning, deep, descriptive, emotional story, and I love it so much, and I really think y'all should try it out. And definitely play Innocence before Requiem if you have the time, but play in whatever order you want. That's totally up to you. But that's going to wrap it up for today's episode, y'all, and y'all have a good one. Later.